Hallo und herzlich willkommen zu einer
Hi, and welcome to one of the last panels of this year's Republica.
Heute vor 106 Tagen ist Russland in die Ukraine einmarschiert.
106 days ago today, Russia invaded Ukraine.
Hilflosigkeit, aber auch
It
Trauer.
has the war has filled us all with anger and sadness, but of course our feelings are nothing to what people on the ground are feeling, and of course their relatives abroad. Both sides are committing crimes of war. 500 people a day are dying. We're speaking of 50,000 dead so far. Verifying all these numbers independently is difficult, though. The situation on the ground makes verification very difficult, and of course there's multiple layers of propaganda. The responsibility of journalists such as you is enormous. They don't only have to do their work and cope with that emotionally, they're also helping to gather evidence of war crimes. How work like that can, how people can work under these conditions is what I want to talk about with Anna Savchuk from the Ukraine desk at Deutsche Welle and Katarina Kryzhanuskaya from the Russian desk. My first question is, how much coordination is there between your two departments? Is that mostly logistical? Do you coordinate correspondence? Or do you have to do a brainstorming of stories together? Indeed, we're two desks, but we're part of the main editorial department for Eastern Europe, so we work very tightly together. So it's still one German medium, and we have colleagues at die Deutsche Welle Russia who are from Ukraine and who write in both languages. Or we have colleagues such as Anna who work in Ukraine and in Ukrainian and Russian, English and German. So it's there are very fluid boundaries, and of course we have these news meetings in the morning where we brainstorm together. And as for the coordination with our correspondents on the ground, we do that together as well, because they work with both desks and they tend to write in both languages, and that takes a lot of time, but it's very good to have that kind of collaboration because we have different perspectives, and it's great if we can share them and talk about them.
Ukraine is
a large country, and I imagine it makes reporting very difficult. What's work like for your correspondents these days, and what conditions are they working? You have to distinguish between how it used to be and how it is now. In October, we had a video hub, a Kiev hub that we opened in Ukraine, and the 24 colleagues working there had to flee when war broke out. So half of the department was in Lviv, and the other half was evacuated to Germany. It's calmed down a bit now. Kiev was only bombed once a week or once every other week. That's the new normal. The colleagues working there are mainly working from home because it's easier, it's safer. You have access to hiding places or to where you can go when you're being bombed, and there's a curfew, so those who used to work the afternoon shift, they're certainly working from home. And they're not losing their spirit. They say it's hard to work because we don't have coffee or cigarettes. How are you supposed to work under those conditions? But of course, they're joking. I think the people working there are truly courageous because some of them decided to stay there because they're men. They're actually not allowed to leave. But the women remained because they knew that it's important to be there during times of war and gather information with your own eyes. To talk about the tasks that our colleagues have, many of them are working in Kiev, and many of the reports we get from people who we are reaching on the phone, they have networks, they work in different cities, but our correspondents are also traveling to the front lines and reporting from there, and there's always a risk assessment that needs to be made, so we don't want to take unnecessary risks. But one of my colleagues who's been reporting on the war in Donbass for years is that preparation these days is much more intense. You have to plan a lot more because coffee and cigarettes aren't the only thing that's missing. There's no fuel either, and no driver is going to take you there. So you have to organize a car, ideally two, in case one of them gets destroyed, so you still have a second one. He bought two spare tires because there's a lot of shrapnel there. So in case a tire bursts, you can change it quickly. But that too is dangerous because you want to drive through these areas very quickly. There are drones in the air that are watching the ground, and the military and civilians are using the same cars.
Man kann denken, das ist eine Provokation, jemand will was Komisches machen und das Auto kann
you might be mistaken for an agent provocateur and risk that your car gets shot at. So you'd prefer to drive quickly. He had to take first help training, and he even has artificial blood in case he gets injured and has to protect himself or his colleagues. And fuel, of course, is a huge problem to get anywhere. You have to negotiate, you have to ask military experts, people you might know on the ground, so that in case you have no fuel left, you can still get help. And he has a diesel tank, which is not quite as combustible as regular fuel. He takes it with him into his hotel room, and it spends the night with him in his room because it's either so expensive or simply non-existent that you have to have it. Helmets, of course, bulletproof vests are ordinary equipment these days, and you have to be very careful because there is constant shooting. As for generating story ideas, is that different than it used to be before the war? Who are your most reliable sources of information these days? Is it difficult to find them? Do people approach you due to the situation and say, hey, I'd like to contribute? That has changed because you can't, there are many areas that you cannot access. The other day, before the war, you might tell yourself, well, that sounds like an interesting story, I'm just going to go there and report. That's no longer possible. As we have so many reporters in Ukraine, and they're so good at that they have such large networks, we tend to have sources nearly everywhere, friends of friends, for example, and whenever we can't go somewhere, we attempt to verify that, talk to as many sources as possible who might be able to tell us, no, actually your information is wrong. I have a colleague who's spending a lot of time in chat groups and who reads what people are talking about. He can post official accounts, for example, this number of people were evacuated. Is that actually true? And he can gather responses eyewitnesses. In addition, the colleague was talking about the chats. It's on Telegram where relatives are trying to find out if their relatives, for example, are injured. And you can find a lot of topics there, and it's a good source of official information and to verify their accounts, and the other way around, to verify what if the politicians can prove what individuals are saying in those chats. And the more sources, the better. But as with the number of sources you are finding today, you can show all of them with a huge disclaimer saying we didn't actually go there. We were unable to verify these claims. We did not get a response. And to answer your question, if people are approaching us, it does happen. The eyewitnesses who want to talk to us, they come up to us. But there are many stories where we want to get witness accounts. Witnesses want to remain anonymous. And it's a huge challenge for us to provide a story to our readers without giving away names, because it's not verifiable after the fact. I would like to talk more about Telegram. This war happens largely on social media, especially on Telegram. Can you explain to me how that works? I know Telegram isn't used that much in Germany because people are afraid that it's got a connection to Russia. From a Ukrainian perspective, I can say we like to use it. Our politicians use it. There are chats where it's seen as a trustworthy channel in the same vein as Signal. More people are using Signal for their private messages. Telegram is a media. I think Deutsche Welle has 7 channels. 4 of them are Ukrainian. We opened a large channel, or the Belarus desk opened a large channel the other day. It's an important medium. There used to be V-Kontakte, and those back in those in Ukraine in around 2015 would know that this was the Russian counterpart to Facebook by Pavel Durov, but he was no longer able to control this social media. It got, I would say, stolen by the state and was then banned in Ukraine, and everyone moved to Telegram, and Telegram is trusted. How does that work? How does it work on Telegram? A politician opens a channel and you follow it. You can use it as a chat, but you can also use it as a channel where only we as Deutsche Welle post, and there's no comments, you can only like things. That's what politicians do. You can create comments threads as well.
In unserem Fall die Deutsche Welle kann da was posten. Und der Vorteil ist,
the advantage is that on Facebook or Twitter there are algorithms that decide what you see and what you can't see, and as a media you don't know which post is going to be shown to how many people. On Telegram you can see everything. It's just simple messages, and you can scroll and find any message at any given time. And it's important to us because Deutsche Welle is banned or blocked in Russia, and you can only find us via a VPN, which is complicated. Facebook has been declared extremist, so the only media where you can still find us freely without a large amount of effort is Telegram. It's not blocked, it's freely accessible. As far as Ukraine, it's simpler with the media situation. But the area that are now occupied by Russia are problematic. And the Russian occupiers tend to block media in the same way as in Russia, so that our users are struggling to open our website, and Telegram is playing a large role there.
And how much of a role does propaganda play on Telegram? What are you confronted with the most, and how do you deal with that? Obviously, you're going to use it to verify sources, but what are your main obstacles that you have to work with? I don't think this has anything to do with Telegram right now, because this is just something that we use as a channel for us and as a source. For example, Zelensky has his own channel, and certain NGOs for human rights. I would separate that from propaganda, because you can use it in any kind of way. But obviously, yes, from both sides, there is an informational war going on, and there are different views. We cannot put them on the same level, but both sides tend to minimize their own losses, saying, okay, very few of ours died, but a lot of the enemies. And on the other side, their own losses, but also their victories, they play up, for example. And you cannot verify that all the time. That's just impossible. The only way we could do that would be if we went there and actually take a look ourselves. One of our reporters was in Lysychansk, which is close to Luhansk, where there's a lot of fighting going on, and then he can exactly say, okay, these kind of buildings are destroyed, this is not existent anymore, this was bombed, I don't see any people. But if you're concerned with numbers of victims, then that's just not possible. We have to write a disclaimer that we couldn't verify it, and then we name the exact sources. For example, saying for the Russian side, or more specifically, the Russian Defense Ministry said this is the number of people that died, and the Ukrainian side says this and that. And we try to be very transparent in this case, because we cannot verify it ourselves, obviously, but the main issue is you have to be very careful. Don't believe anything you're hearing. Just verify as much as you can. The only thing I can do is add to this, and I totally agree with propaganda. You cannot put it on the same level. You have to distance yourself. You have to verify everything, just the way we said. But regarding Russian propaganda, you cannot put this on the same level. That's putting them on giving them the same weight is very difficult for me, because I've been observing Russian propaganda since 2014. I've also been reporting on the Ukrainian war since 2014. That was the main reason why I became a journalist, the war of aggression of Russia. And I cannot really understand how people can just lie like that. This is more than propaganda. We need a new definition for this, a new word. That what is happening on the Russian side and what Putin's regime is doing. You cannot describe this with the words that we have right now. Do you think that people are still as susceptible to this kind of propaganda, or is there something changing within Russia? Let's start with within Russia. It's very hard to judge this from the outside, because obviously there aren't any surveys. Well, that's not true. There are surveys, but they're usually controlled by the state, and we don't have a lot of data for this question. And the data that we have is very strange. Some of these things that they're saying are so primitive. For example, National Socialists in the Ukraine, how can you believe that? But if you hear that year day after day for years, then you don't have any doubts anymore after a while. You stop asking yourself, is this actually true, and accept it. And there's an example that really shows this. We had an interview with the mother of a soldier who died within the first few days of the war in the Ukraine. And we interviewed her, and it was quite horrible for us. We discussed this quite intensely. Of course, she's extremely sad. This is an absolute catastrophe to lose your son. But she said he didn't know why he was there. He was kind of tricked into it. He wasn't given proper preparations. But what she also said, but Ukraine actually was asking for it, and you have to bomb them. You have to resolve the situation. And my thoughts were, how can you say that? You lost your son, and you're still trying to justify this. And this shows quite acutely how well the propaganda works. You're trying to it creates a disconnect between the losses and what you see, and it's very hard to resolve this situation because there is not just propaganda by Russian media, but also the Russian politicians. This is actually a victim of the propaganda is actually propagating it again, and we also propagate it by reporting on it and giving her airtime. And this is something that created a lot of outrage in the Ukraine. But we thought we have to document what is happening and to show how people are thinking, because this is also a fact that is happening. But it's important to contextualize this and explain that the woman says or repeats what she sees in the TV, in the Russian state TV all the time, in order to create context for what we're showing, and we juxtapose it with numbers that show the truth. And what I'm asking myself right now, for example, the rate of casualties on the Russian side between 20 to 50,000 people, much like a factor of 10 higher than the other side. Are the Russian state media reporting on this? And I'm wondering if these numbers increase further, might this bring about some change on the Russian side within Russia, maybe regarding the military culture, that if you see that you're part of a war where many thousand, 50,000 people within 100 days that have died, maybe that changes public opinion. What I'm not going to say that I don't want to remind you of Vietnam, because obviously that was different with regards to US and the media. But do you think this is going to bring about some change, or is that something that doesn't reach the public? No, this doesn't reach them at all. Don't they talk about the numbers? Yeah, they do talk about numbers, but they're very, very low, and it's obviously spun in a different way. They're saying that we are liberating the Ukraine and we're helping the people to liberate them from the oppression. And obviously the casualties are not being mentioned or downplayed and minimized. I wouldn't put any false hope into this, that this will bring any change in the near-term future. The propaganda machine is way too strong for this, and I can only add to that again with a concrete example that I have. There was a military vessel, the Moskva, that was created in the Ukraine. It was created by the Ukrainian military, by Ukrainian soldiers. It was baptized, or there were so many versions about this. They had so many different versions of this. It was about she's saying it was sunk. Sorry, there were so many different versions of the story, and mothers of the dead soldiers that were on the vessel, they don't have any right to speak out on this, and they're being threatened, the families, the mothers, and that's why within Ukraine, people had the hope that the more Russian soldiers would die. This is obviously very mean and sad, but This is not bringing any change. It's not like that. The mothers of the soldiers are they are indoctrinated so much by the propaganda in their head that they cannot actually believe that their son died for the wrong cause and the wrong reason, for the wrong goals. But they're also being threatened and silenced, obviously. They get money for the loss that they incurred, and they're being told that they won't get any money if they're saying anything. Those are all poor soldiers that are usually poor farmers from the regions outside, very far away from Moscow, where you don't have a job, and this is a very good chance to advance in life. And they're not even being told what this is really about. They're thinking that, yeah, I'm going to take part of some military operations and just like war games, but not actual war. And they usually got an SMS from Ukraine, and during the operation that they thought were just an exercise, they actually now got messages by their provider telling them you're now part of the Ukraine, and they couldn't actually believe it because they didn't think that they were going to Ukraine. And similar with the people on the vessel that was sunk, a father from one of those soldiers said on Facebook that he assumed that he died on that vessel, and then they were raiding his home. They were searching him, and obviously that creates a lot of pressure. So it's an illusion to think that the number of the soldiers dying going up is actually bringing about any change. So obviously a major part of the war happened or was moved into in certain areas of Ukraine, and there's not a lot of movement anymore. There's standstill. It's not like the beginning where they took over a city every other day. And there's obviously a lot of fear or worry that the less headlines there are, the quicker the interest of the public wanes. So how does this affect your reporting? First of all, I think that a lot of our journalists and media creators could definitely agree with this. It's similar to how the Corona reporting happened. There's always a lot of interest in one of these breaking stories. There's insane interest. The amount of clicks we get for any story, you have to know that on the Russian side, we're being blocked. Like the numbers of clicks was higher than before the war. People are searching for information, but we can see that the interest is going down again. It's definitely, the numbers are not comparable, but it's very difficult. That happened a lot with revolutions, with wars, with climate crisis, with environmental issues. You have to think about new strategies all the time. Maybe don't report all of the news all day, but maybe report on the numbers once a week. Or I have to think about this a little bit. I cannot give you a straightforward answer right now, because not writing about it is not an answer. But obviously, if you read about it every day that someone is suffering, then you're trying to protect yourself and immunize against the information, which is not going to help. So we're trying to find different aspects that we can write about, so that we can stay emotional and open, that we have protagonists that you can root for. We try to keep the interest up. But we still report on all of our desks. There are 30 people working monothematically on Ukraine, and I'm really happy about that. I can tell you this is a different aspect in the beginning. If you want to read about what is happening now, whereas now you're more interested in some kind of niche aspect of the story, for example, like refugees from Ukraine that now arrived in Germany, where we can now see that the numbers are going up, and where we now report on the difficulty to find a school where they can go to, or find a place that they can live at. Or for Ukrainians, I took up a credit for a piece of real estate, like a flat or something. So what I'm going to do with that, because the flat is not going to be there. So I'm trying to find more stories that generate more interest and to keep the interest going. I assume you also get a lot of threatening feedback or scary feedback for your work. And what do you experience within that regard, and how do you deal with that? I sometimes notice that if I work on social media, especially, that the Ukrainians are very active on social media. And obviously, yes, there are a lot more hate comments. It's pretty, it's a burden on me. And we cannot work under these situations well anymore, but you can definitely see that I sometimes have the feeling that I see what they think about Germany and the German government, and their channel it towards the Deutsche Welle because it's a German medium. And the fact that you don't give us any heavy audience, they're saying to us that it's our fault that we don't get that and we don't get the support that we need. And we're always saying, okay, this is not our fault, we don't have anything to do with this, we're distancing ourselves. But sometimes it's just insults, threats, swear words at us. All these people are very vulnerable, and if you, for example, report on the churches in Ukraine and how Ukrainians are trying to protect these churches so they don't get bombed, and we showed the churches, and there was a lot of reports on that. We got so many comments. Why would you show that? This makes it easier for them to bomb those targets. Are you in league with the Russians? And you can understand that they're just worried, that they're afraid, and they're becoming irrational, which it's going down a little bit again because the war has been going on for so long, and they have realized that just because we show a church, that this is drawing fire to it. But just one more question, can I ask you? It's probably even harder for you to cut videos that show bodies of dead citizens of your country. How do you deal with that? That must be very hard for you.
It was difficult to work as a journalist at all in the beginning. You just wanted to scream in caps lock. I couldn't imagine to go outside because there's no war here. I'm happy about it, of course, but my thoughts were in Ukraine. But work has also helped me to remain constructive because there's a certain workflow where I know I have to do these things, I have to verify that. And there's a framework where I need to wake up every day, and that tells me what I need to do, how I can help. And journalists are lucky that their work remains important. But what has affected me deeply personally was Bucha. We all saw those images, and I was unable to find words. I struggled to describe the situation, and it was a difficult situation. And we simply do not have time to let our emotions get in the way. So work makes this time a bit more constructive. And Katarzyna, for you, what's the biggest challenge?
Ich denke, meine Funktion ist ein bisschen so Koordination. Ich koordiniere.
Well, my work is
ich bespreche Aufträge und so weiter.
Coordinating colleagues' work. I'm in a conversation with a lot of colleagues every day.
Meine persönliche Herausforderung ist,
my personal challenge is to support them, because in the beginning I I underestimated their workload, not just in the Ukrainian, but also our Russian colleagues who are affected differently, but they too are affected. And I would ask them, "How are you?" And the person would start crying because they are editing these videos. Each day they're posting these things. As a coordinator, I have the option of not watching these videos from Bucha, because I tell myself I have to protect myself. I know what they're about, but I'm telling myself I simply can't. But my coworkers do not have that ability. They have to edit these videos. They have to create video sequences for our shows, and many of them are very close to a nervous breakdown. And those many people are hosting friends and family from Ukraine in their home. One of my coworkers has 14 of them, 14 friends and relatives in their home, and yet they still have to work. It's an exceptional situation, and it's my task to offer someone to my colleagues who they can speak to. My God, I wish you all the best for the time ahead. Thank you also to the audience, and enjoy the rest of your time at Republika. Thank you very much.